our lesson today is about two-way frequency tables. A lot of vocab associated with this one, so we'll get to that, during the lesson. I am recording the lesson now. It'll be posted here later, but here's also the trickier vocab. It really breaks it down in this video, so I highly recommend you watch that. The worksheet that you picked up today is the day one practice. It's not evens or odds or anything like that. It's the whole thing. It's just one side, so not really concerned about it. And then just here's all the upcoming assessments and deadlines. So we are in the last 3 weeks of school. So the Module 6 test is scheduled for next Friday, so not this Friday, next Friday. And so is the deadline for late work from the pink folders. And then we have a couple retake opportunities, but then that's it. So if you're absent those days, if you're not coming to tutoring and you want to retake something, you have to make sure that you're ready on those particular days. And then the finals are scheduled last week of school, so it's right here. All right, any questions about any of these dates? All right, so we're gonna start with the notes, and it's a packet this time, so there's quite a bit of notes. So hopefully we can kind of breeze through this. The goal is that tomorrow we just work on the puzzle piece, since tomorrow is a short day. So kind of getting through all the notes today and doing the puzzle piece tomorrow. All right, so first you need to fill this part in. Two-way frequency tables. All right, so two-way frequency tables. They contain data for two category variables, or categorical, I'm not really sure how to say that word. All right, basically two variables which are both categories. And they're listed as paired values. So basically the opposite of numerical data. The only numbers you'll see are the frequencies. All right, so here we have a high school administration asked 100 randomly selected students in 9th and 10th grade about what fruit they like best, and we need to complete the table. So here's how these are set up. You have the inside, which is all the data, and the outside, the margins, which are your totals. So really easy to figure out this total. We're just adding them together. All right, so you might need a calculator just to make sure you're doing it right. But we have 19 plus 12 plus 23, which is good, it is 54. All right, then we have 22, and let me keep it the same color. 22 plus 9 plus 15, 46. All right, so we add the rows across. So rows go left to right, columns go up and down, and you add those basically up and down. So we have 19 plus 22, which is, I think it is 41. Good. And then over here, 12 plus 9. And then over here, 23 plus 15. To give us a grand total of what? Good. So it did say that in the problem, so make sure that we're reading the problems because sometimes it does give us important information to fill these out. Your grand total will always be that corner box. And sometimes you need it to fill in the rest. But you see how this adds up to 100 and this adds up to 100? So two-way frequency. So go ahead and try filling in the one that's underneath it. So try filling that one in. Hello. Hello. have it on number. I did not. Me too, bye-bye. Alright, so just making sure we know that the rows add up together and the columns add up together. So what did we get for this first total here?
16.
Should be 16, good. Over here, add these rows, what do we get?
24.
Good. And then add your columns together. So 8 plus 10, 7 plus 5,
12.
9 plus 1, and 16 plus 24.
40.
All right, so does it add up to 40 going up and down and across?
Yes.
Okay, good. So that's a good indication that we did it right. So how many people were surveyed in this one?
40.
40, right? Because your grand total is always that corner amount. If I asked you how many girls prefer cats, what would you tell me? 7. How many girls prefer cats? If I said how many people surveyed prefer cats, what would you say?
12.
12, because that includes the boys and the girls. All right, so just reading them, answering questions about it. Good. Should be easy points on your test. Any questions? All right, these ones down here I think are a little more fun. I think it's kind of like Sudoku, if you play that little puzzle. But like now there's like different parts that aren't filled out. But knowing that like the rows add up and the columns add up, you can fill in information in the table. So like reading and completing a two-way frequency table. What is something that we can fill in this chart?
12 plus 10.
12 plus 10, which is
22.
22. What else can we fill in?
How did you put 16?
So like if I wanted to fill in this box, what operation am I doing? Good. So all of you are right. I'm doing subtraction because we know that it adds up to this, right? So if I do 100 minus 54, I do the opposite. What number goes in this box? 46, right? All right, what if I wanted to fill in this one? What would that operation be? It would be 36 that goes here. And you know that because you probably did the total minus the frequency. So 46 minus 10, 36 goes here. All right, and then what would this one be? All right, that is correct. And you could have added this together to get that, or subtracted 22 from 100. All right, so now try filling in this one on your own. So just take like 30 seconds, try filling in the one underneath it. Any questions on the top one? Just FYI, my goal is to get the Module 9 test scores in by today. So be on the lookout for that. All right, what's something that we can fill into this table? Like this corner, you mean?
Yeah.
It's 100, good. And what told you that it would be 100?
It says 100 cents per minute.
Good. So that's why I say always read the problem, because that might tell you important information to fill out everything else. All right, so 100 goes there, and now that that's there, what can I fill in? Like what maybe goes in this one?
Oh, 40.
Good, because we do 100 minus 60, good, so we can fill that one in. Now that this one's there, we can fill in this one. So what goes there?
13.
All right, that sounds correct. All right, and it is, good. So 40 minus 10 and 17, good. And now that these are all filled in, we can fill in these too. So then what goes in this total for juice?
25.
This next one,
37.
and this one.
38.
All right, so easy questions? Yes? Yes. All right, any questions about this?
No.
All right, so now is like the trickier part. And it's not really tricky, it's just a little bit of memorization with like what the vocab is. All right, so filling in the tables, being able to read them is a big part of it, but most of the test questions that I see focus on like the vocab. So first we have relative frequency. So fill in that vocab word right here. We have relative frequency. All right, relative frequency is talking about a portion of the data set in relation to like the entire data set. So like percentages, fractions, decimals. So here's a small frequency table just to kind of get you warmed up with it. So we have Kanisha conducted a survey at school. She asked 80 people, so here's her grand total. 80 people whether they preferred basketball, football, or soccer. And here's her data. If she wanted to make a relative frequency table, it would look something like this. So to find out what decimal or percent that it's going to be, it's going to be whatever the frequency is divided by the grand total. Right? You can even write that over here to kind of help you out after Lucas. So frequency divided by your grand total is basically your relative frequency. And I'm also going to put times 100% because usually you'll see it as a percent. She's not here. All right. So then down here, what's the fraction going to look like for football?
0. Oh, 32.
32 divided by 80. If I put that into a calculator, what's the decimal?
0.1.
0.1.
4.
Oh, 0.4. All right, good. And then the fraction for soccer would be what?
0.35.
So the fraction would be,
Oh, 28.
and the decimal is,
0.
did you say 0.15?
0.35.
Oh, 0.5, sorry. All right, so putting that into a calculator is how we get that. All right, the frequency divided by the grand total. Over here we have the relative frequency for the grand total, which is 80 over 80, which equals what?
1.
Good. So for the total, it should equal 1, because that would be like 100%. All these other decimals, when I add them together, should add up to 1. All right, now to make them look like percent, because it's also usually shown as a percent, we're just taking it and multiplying it by 100%. So what's 0.4 written as a percent? 40%, good. Soccer would be
35%.
35%, and the grand total would be
100.
right, does that make sense? All right, yes,
Does the percentages have to add up to the total?
it should. These percentages should add up to 100%.
So they don't have to add up to 80?
Correct. Like these frequencies up here add up to 80, but your relative frequencies, like once you convert them to decimals and percents, should add up to like 100%. All right, good question. All right, so then these like reflection questions, just making sure we understand what's going on. What does the 20 out of 80 fraction mean in the table? Like what does the 20 mean? So 20 students that prefer basketball. I'm just gonna abbreviate it a bit. I'll just put b-ball. So there's no baseball in here. Divided by what? What does the 80 refer to?
The total.
Good. So the 20 refers to students who like basketball. The 80 refers to the grand total. For the types of numbers you can use to write relative frequencies, anyone know? We can write them as decimals. What else? Fractions and percents. Good. Lucas, don't forget to take your headphone out. All right, so you might see a relative frequency table represented as either of these three. I'd say usually percents, but you might see them as decimals like on your test. Any questions? All right, so we have two more vocab words that I'm gonna squeeze into here. And I don't want you to get too hung up on them. So first we have, let me see which one comes first. A joint relative frequency. So right now just fill them in and then I'll explain. So a joint relative frequency. And then the second definition, the other blank, is going to be a marginal relative frequency. All right, so joint relative frequency, marginal relative frequency. When we hear relative, we should be thinking of like fractions, decimals, or percents. All right, so relative is going to be like relative to the entire people that we're serving. Joint and marginal, we'll talk about like how many categories are involved. So joint would be, and it gives you words right here, but I'll just kind of summarize it for you. Joint would be when there's two categories, like girls who like basketball, right? Or boys who like football, things like that. Marginal would be just one category. So like total students that like basketball, total girls that we're serving. So joint is one category, or sorry, opposite, two categories. That's why it's joint. And then marginal is one category. So when I'm looking at this table that's down here, I'm going to highlight my joint relative frequency in yellow, and that's anywhere that there are two categories. So usually like the middle of your table. Marginal is anywhere that's like in the margins is what I call it. So it's one category. So marginal will be in green. anywhere that is just one category. So in the margins. And I don't include the grand total because that's not really either. All right, so questions on the vocab? So joint is towards the center where there's two categories going on at the same time for each box. Marginal is in the margins, right? The margin of your paper, that free space, the edge of your paper is where it's just one category. All right, so take like 30 seconds and fill in this table, the blanks. All right, when you finish filling in the table, you can compare yours to mine that is on the board. All right, any disagreements? Did I fill anything in wrong? All right, so it looks good. And let me see. This one doesn't ask me to solve anything on this page, it's on the next page, that we're going to make a relative frequency table. So the next page, we're making the relative frequency table for the table that we just filled out. And they kind of showed their work here for you. Do you need to show your work for it all the time? No, but it is helpful. Sometimes all you'll see is what's highlighted. All right, sometimes you'll just see the decimal, but it's just showing you that's where it comes from. All right, so for the girls, there was 6 girls who liked basketball, and what will be the denominator? 80, because just regular relative frequency tables are for the whole thing, relative to the entire table. What decimal is 6 divided by 80?
0.075.
Good. All right, and then we have boys that like football. There was 20 of them that did. Denominator is going to be 80, and that decimal is what? Good. The ones that we just filled in, would those be joint or marginal? It would be joint because there's 2 categories going on at the same time. So this is my joint relative frequency that I highlighted in yellow. All right, now let's fill in this one down here. So how many students total liked soccer?
20.
And how many total were surveyed? That decimal would be what?
0.35.
Good. Sorry, kind of writing a little bit too big. And would this one be joint or marginal?
Marginal.
Marginal. So what I'm highlighting in green is my marginal relative frequency. All right, last box for the grand total should equal out to 1. So what's the fraction here? Which that decimal or total ends up being 1. All right, questions on the vocab, questions on how we found these numbers. All right, and then if I wanted to convert them to percents, what would I have to do? Times it by 100. All right, so then take like 30 seconds and answer these two questions. So on your own paper, see if you know it. Those would be like good test questions. Yes, go ahead.
Are they asking for like the decimal, like?
You could list it as a decimal or a percent. So the decimal or percent of girls who prefer football. All right, so for the first one, girls that prefer football, is that going to be what's highlighted in yellow or green? Good, because it's the joint relative frequency. I need to be looking towards the center of the table if I'm looking for two categories at the same time. What is the joint relative frequency of that?
0.15 and 13%.
Good. So 0.15 or 15%. It's this box right here that we are looking at. All right, and then the marginal relative frequency, so just one category. I should be looking in the margins. I also forgot to highlight these ones as green as well. All right, but which number or decimal tells me the number of students who prefer soccer? Good. So 0.35 or 35%. All right, questions, comments? All right, so I'm going to keep moving down. I know it seems like a lot of talking today, but bear with me. I want to give you time to work today and tomorrow. This one down here, I'm going to have you guys start from beginning to end. So this is like your turn. So you're going to make your table, fill in the empty gaps, and then you're going to make your relative frequency table. This time it's in percents, so try to keep that consistent. I'll give you about 3 minutes, and then I'll project the answer on the board. So here's what your table looks like filled out, just the frequency table, and then the relative frequency table is underneath it. Now, notice I didn't include all the work, I didn't show that it was the box 10 divided by 92 times 100, but that's what this final answer should have been. All right, and then it's usually just represented like that. Usually the work isn't shown, but you can include it later. This is for Miss Nicole.
Oh,
It's okay. All right. So what I was saying, if you got the final percents correct, this is what you could apply. The individual work is taking whatever this number is divided by the grand total. All right, relative frequencies are whatever this number is divided by the grand total. Questions? So like I know on your test, I saw a question about making relative frequency tables or which one's correct. So that's how you can verify. All right, now to answer these questions, and I'll just fill in the percents really quickly. So we had 10.9%, 15.2%, 43.5%. All right, so of those surveys, 27.2% are boys who prefer apples. So would that be joint relative frequency or marginal relative frequency? Joint, good. And we know that because if you look at that box, it's towards the center where there's two categories going on at the same time. So joint, like a joint bank account, two people at the same time. All right, what about down here? Of those surveyed, 44.6% are students who prefer apples. Is this joint relative frequency or marginal relative frequency? Good, and you know that because it's one category. Students who prefer apples, so that includes both of them at the same time. And it's in the margins. Questions about that? All right, it's almost done, so bear with me. Now we're going to talk about, I'm going to kind of skip this one because we kind of just talked about it. Or maybe we'll even come back to it if there's time. But now we're going to talk about conditional relative frequency. Which I did see a test question about this one. All right, it's still like, because the relative part means like relative to the total, except now it's not by the grand total. It's by whatever category it's asking about. So for this one, I would say frequency. And then I would say divided by not the grand total. So the total that it's going to talk about is either going to be like these down here or these row totals, not the grand total. So to answer these questions down here, what's the conditional relative frequency that a student likes to lift weights, given that the student does not like aerobics? All right, so that given that, I use that to help me out. We want to see how many students like to lift weights, given that, or out of the students that do not like aerobics. So we need to find the column that represents students that like aerobics. So which column is it going to be? Or student does not like aerobics. So which column is the students that don't like aerobics? This one right here, right? Now, one of these numbers is going to be my numerator, and it needs to be the students that like to lift weights. So which of these three numbers? 13, right? Because right here, like weightlifting, yes, it intersects with that one. So 13 goes on top. And 25 goes on the bottom. So it's out of the students that don't like aerobics, that total is 25. Questions about how we figured that out? So it's just very careful reading on these ones. So 13 out of 25, what is that decimal? And then times 100%. We get 52%. That's our conditional relative frequency. So it's not by the grand total, it's by a different total. All right, try the second reflect question. So try filling that one out on your own and we'll see if you get it right. All right, so for number 2, find the conditional relative frequency. So once you see conditional, that should tell you not divided by the grand total. That a student likes to lift weights, given that the student likes aerobics. So how many total students like aerobics? So I usually start with the denominator first, because that tells me where I need to look. So how many students like aerobics total? So like aerobics is this area. Yes would be that they like it. There's 15 total students that like aerobics, so that will go on the bottom. What goes on the top? Good, because it's students that like to lift weights out of the students that also like aerobics. So 6, and I'll do a different color, for like weightlifting. Yes, they do like weightlifting. That intersects with this column, if that makes sense. So 6 out of 15, what is that decimal? Times 100% would be what? All right, questions, comments? All right, so I think we did it just in time. We have 15 solid minutes for you to work on your practice, the day 1 practice, and then if you're feeling good about that and there's still extra time, there's that puzzle piece, which is what we're spending tomorrow doing. All right. If you have questions, let me know. The answer key is on the wall too, so that you can check your answers, not just copy them. And then that is it.